Well, hello there. I'm Santa Papa John. Welcome to Storytime by Santa. Sit down, and I hope you enjoy the story. Because come in close, my dear friends. Wiggle into your blankets, tuck your feet in nice and warm, and get ready for a story that smells a little like cinnamon, a little like vanilla, and a whole lot like Christmas. Tonight's story is something very important. Not my sleigh, not my boots, not even my beard, although I do try to keep that in good shape for December. Tonight's story is about cookies. Yes, a very small hero. This is a story of the little mouse who saved the cookies. Far up in the North Pole, where the snow sparkled like sugar and the stars twinkled like tiny bells, there are many busy places. There is the toy workshop, of course. There is the reindeer barn. There is the wrapping hall with ribbons flying everywhere. And then there is one of Santa's favorite places in the whole wide world. Not the candy cane factory. Nope. Mrs. Claus's kitchen, Christmas kitchen. Now, if you've ever been to Mrs. Claus's kitchen, let me tell you, it is magnificent. Copper pots hang in neat rows. Big wooden spoons stand at attention like little soldiers. Flour sacks are stacked by the wall, and every shelf is filled with jars of wonderful things like cinnamon, nutmeg, peppermint, cocoa powder, sprinkles, sugar stars, and chocolate chips that somehow always disappear a little faster than expected. No one has ever proven anything, but I have been questioned. In the center of the kitchen stood the great holiday oven, wide and warm and humming softly, while on a long wooden table sat trays and trays and trays of cookie dough waiting for their turn. Because Christmas Eve was only 2 days away and Mrs. Claus was baking the official North Pole cookie collection. Ooh, doesn't that sound yummy? There were gingerbread stars, peppermint swirls, snowflake sugar cookies, maple buttons, chocolate chunk cheer cookies, and my personal favorite, of course, the frosted cranberry crinkle. Now, to be fair, I also say that about at least 6 other cookies. Helping in the kitchen that day were 3 elves, Tinsel Tina, Buttonberry, and Nutmeg Ned. Tina was measured sugar, Buttonberry rolled dough, Ned decorated cookies with a kind of concentration usually reserved for solving mysteries or trying not to sneeze while holding glitter. Mrs. Claus moved through it all with calm, cheerful confidence. Buttonberry, a little more flour on that board. Yes, Mrs. Claus. Ned, the holly leaves go on the wreath cookies, not on your sleeve. Oh, all right, that explains a lot. And Tina, please stop making the sprinkle jars complete in races. They like it, Tina said. Mrs. Claus gave her a look. Tina carefully set the jars down. The racing days are behind them. Now under the warm stove behind the flour sacks and tucked beside the cookie tin lives a tiny mouse named Mary. Mary was small, even for a mouse. She had soft gray fur, quick little paws, and a bright black eyes that noticed everything. She lived in a snug nest made from ribbon scraps, a bit of soft yarn, and one tiny red mitten thumb that she had found and decided was excellent furniture. Mary loved the kitchen. She loved the smell of the baking. She loved the laughter of the elves. She loved the way the oven warmed the floor in winter. And most of all, she loved watching Mrs. Claus work. Mary thought Mrs. Claus was the finest baker in the world, and she was not wrong. Now, Mary was not supposed to help in the kitchen. Not exactly. Mrs. Claus knew she was there. Of course she did. Mrs. Claus knows everything that happens in her kitchen. But as long as Mary behaved herself, didn't nibble anything important, and kept her tiny paws out of the mixing bowls, she was welcome to stay warm and watch. Mary took the responsibility very seriously. She even wore on special days a little apron made from a handkerchief corner. It tied badly and slipped often, but she felt professional in it. That morning, as the cookie baking reached its busiest moment, Mary peeked out from under the stove and sniffed the air. Gingerbread, vanilla, butter, cinnamon, she whispered happily. That's a very good day. From on top of the table, Nutmeg Ned leaned too close to a tray of powdered sugar and sneezed. Poof! A white cloud rose around him. From a moment, all anybody could see were his eyes blinking through a snowfall of sugar. Tinsel Tina burst into laughter. You look like a snow elf. Ned coughed politely. I prefer festively frosted. Even Mrs. Claus laughed at that. And that is where the trouble began. It began with a sneeze. A soft little squeak. Mary's ears stood straight up. She turned towards the cooling shelf in the far corner of the kitchen. It was stacked with trays of cookies, some cooling, some waiting for frosting, some already decorated and ready to be packaged into trays for the sleigh. Another creak, then a tiny wobble. Mary narrowed his eyes. The tallest tray tower on the cooling shelf was leaning. Now, if you're wondering whether a little mouse can recognize a cookie emergency, I assure you she can. Mary squeaked, "Oh no!" But the elves were laughing at Ned's powdered sugar beard and did not hear her. Mary stood on her hind paws and waved both arms. Excuse me, hello, cookie emergency, tray trouble, tower tilting." Nothing. The tower wobbled again. One more tray shifted. A sprinkled tin near the edge trembled. Mary looked from the leaning trays to Mrs. Claus, then back again. The cookie tower was too high for her, too far away to reach quickly if she stayed on the floor, too dangerous to ignore. Now Mary was tiny, very tiny. And if you've ever been tiny in a busy room, you know it's a difficult truth. Sometimes being small means nobody notices your warning until the rolling pin is already halfway off the table. But Mary was clever, very clever. She zipped from under the stove to the leg of the big table and scampered up, her little claws gripping the wood like hooks. Up she went, past the towel, past the spoon, past a drippy bowl of melted icing that smelled so heavenly she had to remind herself to stay focused. At the top of the table she stood and called again as loudly as a mouse can call. Squeak, squeak, squeak! Tinsel Tina looked down. Oh, hello, Mary. Mary pointed dramatically with both paws towards the cooling shelf. Tina blinked, then she saw it. Mrs. Claus, the tray stack. Everybody turned. Mrs. Claus, Tina cracked. The whole cookie tower leaned sideways like it was trying to take a nap standing up. Mrs. Claus moved instantly. Ned, catch the bottom tray. I've got it. Buttonberry, hold the shelf. Holding. Tina, the sprinkle tin. On it. The elves scrambled. Mrs. Claus reached the tower just as the top tray began to slip. She steadied it with both hands. Ned grabbed the bottom tray. Buttonberry braced the shelf. Tina caught the sprinkle can before it rolled off and scattered festive chaos over everything. And for one long second, the entire kitchen held its breath. Then the tower stopped wobbling. The trays settled. The cookies were safe. Everybody exhaled at once. Mrs. Claus placed the top tray securely down and turned slowly. "Who spotted that first?" she said. Tinsel Tina pointed to the table. Mary stood there panting, one paw over her tiny chest, the other still aimed heroically towards the shelf. Mrs. Claus smiled. "Mary did?" The elves stared. Ned, still covered in powdered sugar, said, "The little mouse saved the cookies." Mary straightened her apron. Mrs. Claus walked over and knelt beside the table, eye to eye with the tiny mouse. "Well done, Mary," she said warmly. "That was brave, quick thinking." Mary's whiskers twitched with pride. Tina's clapped her floury hands. "3 cheers for Mary!" And before Mary knew what was happening, the elves were chanting, "Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray!" Mary tried to look down and look calm and look professional, but she was glowing from nose to tail. Mrs. Claus reached into the sideboard and took out the smallest saucer in the kitchen. Into it she placed one tiny warm sugar cookie shaped like a star. "For our kitchen guardian," she said. Mary grasped. "A whole cookie? An entire cookie? A star cookie?" For a mouse, this was not a snack. This was a banquet, a parade, a national holiday all at once. She placed both paws on the saucer and whispered, "Thank you." But the day was not done with surprises, because when Mrs. Claus checked the shelf more closely, she discovered something important. The back leg of the cooling rack had loosened. One little wheel had cracked, and the whole thing was unstable. If this had gone unnoticed, Mrs. Claus said, we might have lost half the Christmas cookies. Ned looked horrified. "Half?" Tina looked faint. "That's too many cookies for one sentence." Mrs. Claus nodded. "It needs fixing before we use it again." Now the head fix-it elf, Wrenchley, was down in the sleigh barn with a jammed bell polishing machine and couldn't come right away. Buttonberry frowned at the rack. "Could we prop it up against with a cookbook?" Mrs. Claus gave him a look. "Not one of my cookbooks." "Right," he said. "Terrible plan. I would draw it." Everybody fell silent. Mary, meanwhile, was nibbling the edge of her star cookie in a tiny, thoughtful bites. She looked at the broken wheel. She looked at the shelf. She looked at the pile of ribbon scraps under the sideboard. Then she looked at the basket of wooden clothespins. Her nose twitched. An idea. Mary set down her cookie and tugged on Tina's apron hem. Tina looked down. "What is it, tiny hero?" Mary pointed to the ribbon scraps, then to the clothespins, then to the loose wheel. Tina frowned in concentration. "You want a ribbon wheel pin shelf dance." Mary put both paws over her face. Mrs. Claus chuckled. "Let's see what she means." Mary scurried to the basket, climbed in, pushed the clothespin over the edge. It landed with a clank. Then she dragged out a thick black strip. Then another. She wanted to use us to brace the leg, Mrs. Claus said. Ned leaned in with ribbon and clothespins. Mrs. Claus nodded slowly as a temporary support. It might just work. Soon the whole kitchen became a cheerful engineering workshop. Tina tried the ribbons around the weak leg and the side support. Buttonberry clipped them into place with clothespins, and Ned held the rack steady and said things like, Please don't collapse. I'm not emotionally prepared. Mary scampered beside the base, pointing and squeaking corrections. A little tighter there. Not that pin. The striped one. Not the ribbon goes under. At least that's what she meant. To the elves it sounded like determined squeaking, but somehow they understood. Finally, the brace was in place. Mrs. Claus gently tested the rack. It held. She added one tray. Still held. She held another tray. Solid. A third. Perfect. Tina threw her hands up. It works! Buttonberry cheered. The cookies are back in business. Ned bowed towards Mary. Chief Assistant Engineer Mouse, I salute you. Mary placed one paw on her chest and nodded gladly. Then, because good things tend to multiply in kitchens like magic, the rest of the afternoon became the happiest kind of busy. Cookies cooled safely, icing swirled, sprinkles danced, Mrs. Claus hummed when she worked, and Mary, now officially part of the team, was given a very serious job, crumb inspection, which meant she followed the table line, making sure nothing delicious went to waste. She looked and took the role with enormous dignity. Later, while the final trays were packed into shiny tins with red ribbons, Mrs. Claus gathered everybody around. Well, she said, looking from elf to elf and finally to the tiny mouse on her saucer, today we had a wobble, a warning, a rescue, and a repair. That sounds to me like a very successful kitchen day. Tina laughed, especially the warning part. Ned laughed, nodded, and the not losing half the cookie part. Mrs. Claus smiled at Mary, and all because someone small was paying attention. Just then, as if the story had been waiting for perfect timing, the kitchen door opened up and in I walked. That's me, Santa Claus. I stopped, sniffed the air, smiled. Well now, something wonderful has happened in here today. Tina rushed over. Santa, Mary saved the cookies. I blinked. Mary, the mouse? Mary stood up very straight on her saucer. I walked over, bent down, and looked at her with my warmest Santa twinkle. Is that so? Mary nodded. Ned said she spotted the leaning trays first. Buttonberry added, and she helped us fix the rack. Mrs. Claus folded her hands and smiled. That smile of hers that says, boy, I'm proud and I knew this would happen. Well, I said, this is one remarkable mouse. And from my coat pocket I took something very special, a little tiny silver bell. It was no bigger than the tip of my thumb, with a red ribbon loop tied neatly at its top. For the little mouse who saved the cookies, I said, and reminded us all that being small does not mean being unimportant. Mary stared, whiskers trembling. Mrs. Claus tied the bell gently around her apron string like a badge. When Mary moved, it gave the tiniest, sweetest jingle. Ting! The whole kitchen went soft and quiet for a moment. Then Tina whispered, that's the cutest thing I've ever heard. Second cutest, said Ned. The first was my powdered sugar beard. Everyone laughed, including Mrs. Claus. That evening, after the tins were stacked and the labels and the kitchen floor had been swept and the oven had been settled into its warm nighttime hum, Mary curled up in her little tiny nest beneath the stove. Her tiny silver bell rested against her apron. Her saucer sat beside her with the last crumb of star cookie still waiting, and from the shelf above, safe and steady now, the Christmas cookies waited to be shared all across the world. Mary closed her eyes and smiled, because sometimes the biggest Christmas help comes from the smallest paws. And from that day on, whenever the elves heard a little tiny squeak, ting, squeak, they would smile and say, there goes Mary, keeper of the cookies. And that, my friends, is the story of the little mouse who saved the cookies. Ho, ho, ho! The moral of the story: being small doesn't mean your courage is small, your ideas are small, and your kindness is small. Mary noticed what others missed, spoke up in her own way, and helped save something important because she cared enough to act. When we pay attention, use our gifts, and bravely help where we can, we discover that even the tiniest among us can make a very big difference. Isn't that amazing, boys and girls, mums and dads? Just remember, being small doesn't mean you can't help. Ho, ho, ho! Come back again the next time for Santa's Storytime by Santa. Santa loves you. Ho, ho, ho!